What kind of woman loses everything in one day, nearly drowns in a frozen river, and wakes up in a stranger's cabin miles from town? The kind of woman who has nowhere left to go. The Montana winter howled outside Jonah Maddox's cabin like a living thing. Snow blew sideways across the pines, rattling the windows as if the storm itself wanted inside. But the danger outside was nothing compared to the storm inside Martha Sinclair's heart. She sat up slowly on the rough cot, her body heavy with weakness. Her throat ached. Her skull pounded, her fingers trembled as she touched her forehead. It was damp with sweat. The fever was still there, lingering, threatening to pull her back under. She didn't remember how she'd gotten here, only flashes. The icy river swallowing her whole, the roar in her ears, strong hands dragging her out. And then, darkness. Now she was warm, wrapped in thick blankets that smelled faintly of pine and wood smoke. A fire crackled in the stone hearth, throwing soft orange light across the cabin's simple walls. It was small but sturdy, the home of a man who lived alone and worked with his hands. A man she barely knew. She tried to sit fully upright but gasped as pain shot through her chest. The movement must have woken him because a rough, steady voice spoke from somewhere near the table. "Take it slow, you nearly froze solid out there." She looked up. Jonah Maddox sat in a wooden chair, boots planted wide, hands busy carving a piece of wood with a small knife. He was big, broad in the shoulders, built like a man who cut trees for a living. His hair was dark, wavy, and too long. His beard needed trimming. His eyes were gray as winter sky and just as unreadable. He didn't smile. He didn't nod. He just watched her with that quiet, steady way of his. Where am I?" Martha whispered. "My place," he said simply, 3 miles from Wolf Pine. Her heart lurched at the town's name, Wolf Pine. The place where she had been humiliated, lied to, thrown out like trash. The place that had stripped her of every bit of hope she'd come with. She swallowed hard. "I shouldn't be here," quote. "You'd be dead if you weren't," Jonah said, rising from his chair. "Drink this." He brought her a tin cup of warm broth. His hands were large enough to wrap around half the cup, yet he held it with surprising gentleness. Martha's fingers brushed his as she took it, and heat shot through her cheeks. She stared into the broth so she wouldn't have to look at him. "I'm sorry," she whispered, "for causing trouble." "You didn't cause trouble," he said. "Trouble caused you." She blinked up at him, startled by the unexpected kindness. No one in Wolf Pine had spoken to her like that. No one had believed her. No one had helped her, except him. Jonah went back to his chair, picking up the carving again. "You remember anything?" quote. She hesitated. "Some. I went to meet Dale Hartley." Jonah snorted, low and bitter. "Figures." "He denied knowing me," Martha whispered. The memory stabbed through her chest like a knife. "He burned my letters, said I was nobody." Jonah didn't look surprised. Dale Hartley's a coward. Always has been. She blinked. "You know him?" quote. "Everyone knows everyone in Wolf Pine." He shrugged. "Some folks are worth knowing, some ain't." That was all he said, but it was enough. Martha's throat tightened. "I didn't know where else to go. The whole town looked at me like I was something dirty." Jonah paused his carving. "You're not dirty." She looked away quickly, blinking back tears. "I didn't mean to trouble you. I'll leave as soon as I'm able." "No, you won't," he said firmly. "There's a storm coming. You go out there, you die. But I—" "No buts." His voice was rough but steady. "You're staying here until you can stand without swaying." Her fingers tightened around the cup. No one had spoken to her with that kind of certainty in a long time. Jonah stood and tossed another log into the fire. Sparks flared, lighting his face. Even in shadow, he looked carved from something solid. Mountain rock or stubborn hope. "How long was I asleep?" she asked softly. "Hours." Fever hit hard. He tilted his head at her. "You're still burning." She touched her forehead again, wincing. I thought I heard water earlier." "You did," Jonah said, grabbing his coat. "I was filling the tub." Her cheeks warmed. "A bath?" He shrugged. "Can't have you freezing to death one minute and burning the next." She nodded, grateful, exhausted, embarrassed. "It's through that curtain," Jonah said, pointing. "You need anything, call out." He opened the cabin door. A blast of cold air rushed in. "Where are you going?" she asked, startled. "To check the horses," he answered. "Won't be long." The door shut behind him. The cabin felt too quiet without him. Martha finished the broth, set the cup aside, and pushed herself to standing. The fever made her head swim, but the cold edge of fear kept her moving. She needed water. She needed coolness. Her skin felt like it was on fire. Her eyes drifted to the curtain. Beyond it was the small room Jonah had mentioned. A tub. Water. Relief. Her mind was foggy, her breath quick. She stepped forward, one hand skimming the wall for balance. The curtain swayed as she pushed through. Steam hit her first. Warm. Thick. Comforting. She sighed, dizzy with fever, and stepped closer. She could hear water shifting softly in the tub. She reached for it, desperate to cool her burning skin. Her foot slipped. Her balance vanished. She fell forward with a splash. Hot water surged around her, soaking her thin nightgown, clinging to her skin. And then, strong hands caught her waist, a hard chest beneath her cheek, a deep voice, stunned and rough, rumbled above her ear. "Martha, what in God's name are you doing?" She froze. Her fevered mind cleared just enough for horror to hit her. She was in the tub, with Jonah, pressed against him. His bare chest, his arms around her. Her breath caught. Her voice failed. Her heart thundered against her ribs. Jonah tightened his grip gently, steadying her before she slipped under the water again. "Easy," he said quietly. "Just breathe." But Martha couldn't breathe at all. Not with his hands on her. Not with the steam curling around them. Not with the shock of soft skin and strong muscle pressing against her in the tiny wooden tub. Not with the sudden, wild truth hitting her like a second storm. She wasn't afraid of drowning. She was afraid of how safe his arms felt, and how much she wanted to stay right where she was. How long could a woman stay in a man's arms before her heart forgot danger and remembered only warmth? Martha did not know. She only knew she could not move. Steam filled the tiny room as Jonah held her steady in the tub, his hands strong around her waist. Water dripped from his dark beard. His gray eyes searched her face, not with anger, but with concern so deep it made her breath tremble. "You're burning up," he said quietly. "Fever's making you dizzy." Her cheeks flamed hotter than the water. I thought the tub was empty," she whispered. "I didn't know you were in it." "That much is clear." His arm tightened a little to keep her upright. "You nearly cracked your skull on the edge." She tried to pull back. Her hand slipped on the slick wood, and she fell against him again. Jonah caught her with a quick movement that sent another wave of water over the side. "Stop fighting," he said gently. "You'll slip again." "I shouldn't be here," Martha said, her voice shaking. "This is improper." "You falling into the river was improper too," Jonah said. "But here we are." She finally pushed far enough that she could look at him without touching his chest. Her soaked nightgown clung to her skin, outlining every curve. Jonah's gaze flicked away instantly. He reached for a blanket he had placed on a chair beside the tub. "Hold this to your chest," he said, handing it to her without meeting her eyes. She obeyed, clutching the thick wool against her body. "Can you stand?" he asked. "I think so." But when she tried, her legs buckled again. Jonah stood with her, lifting her carefully out of the water. His hands remained steady, even as her world swayed. He wrapped the blanket around her shoulders and held her close enough to keep her from falling. Water streamed from both of them onto the wooden floor. Martha felt more exposed in that moment than she ever had in her life. "I am so sorry," she whispered. "I didn't mean to climb into the tub with you." Jonah exhaled, a low sound almost like a laugh. "Martha, if I thought you did it on purpose, I'd be far more confused than I am now." She wanted to disappear. Instead, she shivered violently, teeth chattering. "That fever is getting worse," he said. "Into bed now." He guided her out of the small bathroom and across the warm cabin. Martha felt weak, swaying on her feet. Jonah noticed and lifted her arms to steady her. "No," she whispered, embarrassed. "I can walk. You can barely see straight." He scooped her into his arms before she could argue. Her heartbeat fluttered at the unexpected closeness. She kept her face down, hiding the flush across her cheeks. He set her gently on the cot and piled blankets over her until she could barely move. "You stay warm," he said firmly. "I'll bring something for the fever." He turned to go, but Martha reached for his wrist without thinking. Her fingers brushed his skin before she froze, startled by her own boldness. "Jonah," she whispered. He looked back at her. Quiet, patient, unreadable. "Thank you," she said softly, "for saving me, for all of this." Something flickered in his gray eyes, something she couldn't name. "You're safe now," he said. "Rest." He prepared tea made from willow bark and honey. He sat beside her, feeding her spoonfuls when her hands shook too badly. Martha drank, watching his face in the firelight. Strong, silent, kind in a way she didn't understand. When he helped her lie back, her voice came out small. "Do people in Wolf Pine know I'm here?" "They know someone dragged you out of the river," Jonah said. "Most think you slipped." "And the rest?" "Think you jumped." Martha shut her eyes. Shame pressed heavy against her ribs. "I didn't mean to," she whispered. "I know," Jonah said simply. She looked at him again. "Why did you save me?" The question hung between them like smoke. Jonah stared at the fire. "Because I've seen too much death to let another person slip away. And because trouble was coming for you, and you were facing it alone." She swallowed hard. "Am I trouble?" Quote. He looked at her then, direct, serious, unshaken. "No," he said, "but trouble follows people who deserve better. You're one of them." She could not speak. He rose, adjusting the blankets. "Sleep. We'll talk more when the fever breaks." But she didn't want him to go. Not yet. Not after all this. "Jonah," she whispered again. He paused. "I'm scared." "I know," he said, softer than before. "But you are not alone anymore." He moved toward the door to check the storm outside. The wind howled, shaking the walls. Martha watched him, feeling a strange warmth in her chest, not from the fever, but from something deeper, something she had not felt in a long, long time. When he closed the door again, snow blasted across his shoulders. He shrugged off his coat, hung it near the fire, and turned to look at her. And for the first time, Martha saw something unexpected in his eyes. Not pity, not obligation, but protectiveness. Something fierce and quiet. Something she didn't dare name. He sat beside the fire, tending it, keeping watch over her like a man guarding something precious. Hours passed. Her fever pulled her in and out of awareness. Each time she opened her eyes, Jonah was still there. And each time, the same thought came. This man didn't know her. He owed her nothing. Yet he stayed. She drifted in and out of sleep until a sudden memory surfaced, sharp and vivid. The letters burning. Dale's face twisted in lies. The town turning its back. Her voice cracked as she whispered into the darkness. "Jonah, what am I supposed to do now?" Jonah turned his head slowly. "You heal," he said. "You get your strength back, and then we figure out the rest. Together." She blinked at him, unsure she had heard correctly. "Together?" she whispered. His jaw tightened, his eyes steady on hers. "I pulled you out of that river once," he said. "I'm not letting you fall back in." And in that moment, as the storm beat against the cabin and the fire burned low, Martha felt something inside her begin to thaw. She wasn't safe in Wolf Pine. But she was safe here, with him. What happens when two people who were never meant to meet suddenly can't imagine surviving without each other? Martha learned that answer the moment her fever broke, and Jonah Maddox became the one steady thing in a world that had fallen apart. By the next morning, the storm had quieted. Gray light spilled through the frost-covered windows. Martha woke slowly, her body aching but clearer than before. She pushed herself upright, surprised she could do it without swaying. Jonah sat at the table sharpening a blade, shoulders relaxed, but eyes alert the moment he heard her move. "You're awake," he said. "Yes," Martha whispered, "and I feel better." He nodded, setting the blade aside. "Good, you were burning up half the night." She looked down at her hands, clasped tightly in her lap. A memory flashed. The tub, the water, his hands on her waist, his chest under her cheek. Her face heated. "About what happened?" "I didn't mean—" "You were fevered," Jonah cut in gently. "You thought you were somewhere else. It wasn't your fault." "It was still improper," she whispered. Jonah looked at her quietly for a long moment. "Martha, I'd rather you alive and embarrassed than frozen in that river." She swallowed hard. He stood then, moving to the stove where a pot simmered. "You need food. You'll get your strength back faster." As he ladled stew into a bowl, Martha's eyes drifted over the small cabin, the fur-covered cot, the neat tools, the books stacked in careful piles. Everything about this place felt steady, warm, real, so different from the cold, cruel streets of Wolf Pine. And different from Dale Hartley's lies. Jonah handed her the bowl and pulled a chair beside the cot. She ate slowly, her hands warming around the tin. "I'll take you back to town in a couple of days," Jonah said, "when you're stronger." Her stomach twisted. "To Wolf Pine?" He hesitated. "Unless there's somewhere else you'd rather go." She looked into the fire, words barely above a whisper. "I have nowhere." Jonah leaned back in his chair. "Then stay here a while, until you figure out what's next." She stared at him in surprise. "Jonah, you barely know me." Quote, "I don't need to know everything to see you deserve better than what that town gave you." Her throat tightened. "They'll assume things." He shrugged. "They assume things anyway." She looked down at her hands again. "I don't want to be a burden." "You're not," he said firmly, "and you won't be." His voice had a strength she couldn't argue with. She ate in silence for a moment before speaking again. "Why do you live out here alone?" Jonah's expression shifted, something shadowed crossing his eyes. "My wife died 3 winters back," he said quietly. "The fever took her fast." Martha's heart clenched. "I'm so sorry." Jonah nodded once. "I built all this for her. After she passed, the world got quieter, sometimes too quiet." Martha understood that kind of quiet all too well. He set her empty bowl aside. "I'm going to check the horses. I'll be right outside." When he stepped out into the cold, Martha pulled the blanket tighter around her shoulders. She breathed deeply, letting the heat of the fire settle her thoughts. Jonah Maddox had saved her life. Now he was offering something even rarer. Safety, time, the chance to breathe again. But could she stay? Could she dare trust herself near a man like him, quiet and strong enough to steady her just by standing near? She didn't know. But she knew one thing. She wanted to try. She stood carefully, testing her strength. She was wobbly, but not faint. Wrapping the blanket around herself, she walked toward the door. The cold air hit her the moment she stepped outside. Jonah stood by the barn, brushing snow off the rail. He turned when he heard her footsteps. "You shouldn't be up," he said, striding toward her. "I wanted to try walking," she said softly. He reached her in 3 long steps. "You'll catch cold. Come inside." She shook her head. "No, just stay with me for a minute." His expression softened. "All right." They stood together in the quiet snowfall, breath rising in faint clouds. The world around them was still, white pines, untouched drifts, the faint rumble of the river far below. "Jonah," she whispered, "when you pulled me out of the water, I thought I was dead." Quote, "You were close," he said. "You didn't have to help me." "I know." "Then why did you?" He looked down at her, eyes steady, "Because something in you refused to quit, even when the world turned its back. I couldn't let that go under." Her heart tugged, raw and full. She stepped closer, her blanket brushing his coat. "You saved me twice," she whispered. "In the river, and in that tub." A faint smile tugged his mouth. "I suppose I did." "And now, I don't know what would have happened without you." Jonah's breath caught, not with surprise, but with something deeper. "Martha," he said quietly, "I don't want you to think you owe me anything." "I don't," she said, "but I feel safe. For the first time since I left St. Louis." He reached up and gently brushed a strand of damp hair from her cheek. His touch was warm, steady, careful. "You are safe," he said, "as long as I'm here." Her breath hitched. "Jonah." He lowered his hand. "I don't want to push you," he said. "You've been through too much. You need time. Rest. A clear head before you make choices." Quote. She shook her head slowly. "I know what I'm choosing." He froze. "For now," she whispered, "I choose to stay." The tension in his shoulders eased, replaced by something far more fragile. Hope. "You sure?" he asked. "Yes." Jonah stepped closer. The cold breeze tugged at his coat, but he didn't seem to feel it. His voice dropped into something low and warm. "Then you stay as long as you need." Martha's breath trembled. "Only if you'll have me," she said softly. Jonah cupped her cheek with a hand big enough to span half her jaw. His thumb brushed lightly across her skin. "I had you the second I pulled you out of that river," he said. And I wasn't about to let go. Her eyes stung. "Jonah!" He leaned his forehead to hers. "We'll figure the rest out later. One day at a time." Snow drifted softly around them as he pulled her into his arms. Not out of obligation, not out of rescue, but out of something slow and real. Warmth spread through her chest, steady and sure. Martha closed her eyes. For the first time in months, she could breathe. She had survived the river, survived betrayal, survived the shame, and now she had found a place she didn't know she was looking for, a place she could stay, a place she could begin again, in the arms of a man who held her like something worth saving. And Martha Sinclair knew this was only the beginning.